one last team to wrap up this first breakdown of the rankings. Our number 25 squad. This is the one that we disagree the most about, actually. The Las Vegas Raiders, who you had a little bit lower than here, but I have them at 7-10. I could see them being a little bit better than that if things break their way. You have two really good receivers, Devontae Adams obviously being the big name, but I think Jacoby Myers has proven to be really solid. You have two great tight ends. Brock Bowers was a big deal in the draft. One of the better tight end prospects we've seen maybe ever. Michael Mayer, still a really solid guy who's good at Notre Dame. I think the offensive line, if Jackson Powers Johnson can step into that left guard spot as a rookie, I think this offensive line is pretty well rounded. Colton Miller being the standout. And my guy, Gardner Minshew, led the Colts to a 9-8 record last year. I will always say top 32 quarterback in the NFL. I think that he's got the chain-moving receivers. He's got the big play guy in Adams and maybe Bowers. We'll see how quickly he does it. I think that I don't think Aiden O'Connell, maybe he wins the job. I just think I would be disappointed if Aiden O'Connell wins the job. Unless he's going to completely surprise me and take a huge leap, but I didn't see that from him last year. I think Minshew hopefully will be the starter. And then they brought in Luke Getsy, who was the Bears offensive coordinator, and the Bears ran the ball a ton. So I'm interested to see how Zamir White works out, because he's a guy who stepped in for an injured Josh Jacobs and had 3 or 4 pretty solid games to wrap up last season. But definitely not a proven commodity either. So what do you make of this unit as a whole? Are you as high on it as I am?
My concern is quarterback. I like Minshew. I do think Minshew is going to be the starter because I think they paid him way too much money to lose the quarterback job to Aiden O'Connell. I don't know. That's just me personally, but their O-line I think is okay. I think it'll be better if Powers Johnson ends up moving into that starting role. They do have Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers, which I think is great security blankets for whoever's going to be the quarterback, most likely Minshew. Mm-hmm. So there's potential here. I do see it. And they also have, in a weird way, they have a player's coach. This is a guy the team loves. These guys love this guy. They're ride or die for Antonio Pierce. And so he's going to get the most out of this team. I just don't know if it's enough to be a good team, of course.
Yeah, back in spring, I was saying, ooh, what if the Raiders were the 7th seed in the AFC? It's not going to happen, unfortunately, but I do think this is a team that's going to be really competitive. We'll get to the Chargers in our next episode, but I'm not fully convinced that the Chargers are better than this team. I have Raiders at 7 wins, but you're a little higher on the Chargers than I am, which is fine because they have some top-end talent that's really impressive. Defensively, I think this team already is really good, and they have a few swing guys that can make them even better. Tyree Wilson was a top 10 pick, didn't get much out of him as a rookie, but if he can elevate and be a really solid edge rusher for this team, I think that's going to help. And then Jack Jones, who they got from New England because he just continued to shoot himself in the foot, but once again, when he's on the field, he produces, and we saw in the back half of last year, he was really good for this Raiders team. If he can stay out of trouble, stay on the field, that's the number 1 corner. So those are 2 guys that can swing this defense to be even better. But even without them, Max Crosby's dominant. They brought in Christian Wilkins, Mr. 100 tackles at the defensive tackle position from the Dolphins, paid him big money. Malcolm Kuntz is solid. Robert Spillane, after being a backup for most of his career, had a good year last year as a starter. This is the type of defense that we kind of saw Patrick Graham employ with the Giants. Just these pesky guys in the secondary like Marcus Epps and Nate Hobbs who are going to play physical and be a pain, and they rely on their front 7 to be the dominant force of the defense. And Max Crosby's better than anyone he had with the Giants anyway. I think this was Graham's second year with the Raiders, I think. So I believe in this defense to be top 10, top 12, maybe better than that if those guys I talked about break out and keep playing well. Great kicker-punter combination, which is something. It's something. So I'm higher on this team. I'm giving them 7-10, but if the Chargers are worse than we think, or if Denver decides to go 1-16 or something, I could see this team getting to 9 wins. I think it's a long shot, but similar to Denver last year, where Denver until they bench their quarterback, refuse to remove themselves from the playoff conversation. I think that's this team this year. I think maybe they won't win 60. Maybe they won't put 63 points on the board like they did against the Chargers. But I think they're going to be competitive. What do you say to my outlook on that? Like what is you kind of already talked about it, but what's giving you pause with them?
I definitely understand the optimism because there's definitely some guys to like, especially on the defense. Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins. Maybe this is going to sound like a hater because he left the Dolphins. Don't know if he was worth all that money. But Christian Wilkins is still really good. They have great linebackers like Divine Diablo and Robert Spillane. Their secondary is pretty decent. They're all good players. Like, I definitely see the optimism. My concern is just that the team does not have enough top end talent across the board to beat the better teams they need to be playoff contenders, which I think is where a lot of other teams who have the explosive talents at every position are like, that's why they're the best teams.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's going to be the thing with them and the Chargers. It's like Jim Harbaugh has pedigree. We know that. Justin Herbert, foot injury that he has right now aside, is an elite quarterback. So that is where it's like a philosophical discussion. Like what matters more to a football team? The team or the top end guys? And like obviously football is more of a team sport than a sport like basketball. But like you're saying, I think what the Chargers have in this division matters for something, but we can get into them on the next episode because there's pros and cons to them as well.